Good morning, Philippines. Here's the plan. It's a very, very rainy day, and I think the plan for maybe the entire day will be cutting and bending and tying together rebar to use in the columns and the footings and possibly the beams. It's a relatively small crew today, but they're all trying to stay dry in this pretty horrible, almost English weather. And that's what they're all working on. It's all working on rebar today. What could possibly go wrong with that? Well, it's remained wet and miserable and grey all day today. So today is not about blokes digging holes. It's men of steel. These guys have been busy. Oh, that's too loud. These guys have been busy all day, cutting, bending, tying, shaping on this machine over here. And there's a load of steel that I'm pretty sure wasn't shaped when we came in this morning. Let's try the other side and see if it's a little quieter. So maybe a little quieter this side. Not sure how clear the last section was. So men of steel today. Cutting, shaping, twisting together using steel wires to form the columns and possibly some of the beams, I'm not sure, and then the footings for the base of the columns. So a lot of steel has been bent, shaped and cut, ready for use, I guess, next week. Maybe some of this will actually start to get put into place. We'll have to wait and see. But it's definitely all hands to being men of steel today and no hands to blokes digging holes, which is probably a relief to anybody that's seen any of the clips, of incessant clips, to be honest, of blokes digging holes. So there you go. Completely different focus today, all thanks to the weather, I think. It is Saturday, so it's the end of the work week for these guys. I think typically it's payday, I'm not sure. Haven't seen an engineer on site today, and there's probably been no need. Manny, the lead foreman, with his back to us in the white boots, has been keeping a very close eye on everybody. So it's all progressed under the circumstances, I think, very well. So we've still got a couple of hours to go today. They're coming towards the end. It's been obviously a short work week. We only started on Wednesday. I think it was Wednesday. Looking forward to a little bit more sunshine next week. Don't want it blisteringly hot, but hopefully it'll allow them to get back out onto the actual site of where the house is, rather than only being focused here. Right, we'll come back and have one last look at the end of the day. Probably won't be any noticeable difference, but we'll come back and see anyway. So it's time to explain Philippines 4.0. Fairly easy, really. I've rather selfishly named the channel after a way that I've carved up my life. So part one was England. Grew up in England, educated in England, then started work. And after a very short time, 2 or 3 years, I moved to Hong Kong with my company. They asked me whether I was interested in moving to Hong Kong, and I said, let me think about it, yes. And the next part, part two, was my working life in Hong Kong. And that ran until 2019. And at that point, I stopped working. And then followed part three, which was 2 and a bit years of being, as Ross might say, on a break. And that was great. it was lovely. It was fantastic not to have to get up every morning due to an alarm. But ultimately, it did get rather boring. Which takes us to part 4. After my daughter had finished school, we made a move that we've been thinking about for quite a long time and moved to the Philippines. That was the 4th part of my life, Philippines 4.0. There might be a 4.1 at some point, I don't know, or maybe even a 5, but we're on 4.0 right now. And despite some initial small issues with getting here, which I'll talk about another time, we're here, we're set up, and as you've seen in the previous first video, we started part 1 of the grand plan of building a house. So that is why Philippines 4.0.